Because then you're unleashing the yuva of this country. People from Bharat, they're not difficult to work with. I want you to think of two separate areas in your lives. Know yourself, connect with yourself, understand your values. Amma bolti thi dheere bolo, bura lag jayega. Zyada nahi bolo. Papa, he used to say, tumhara hak hai. Namaste and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. In fact, I'm quite emotional. This is my first visit to Rishigud University, and I've been involved from the early stages of its concept. When I spoke to Sahilji, he told me you're all very bright, and a lot of you are feeling the cold for the first time, so your energy levels may be a bit low. I want to keep it interactive, so if you have any questions, do not be shy, just put your hand up and I'll be happy to answer. So the topic is India's global dream and its diaspora. So I'm one of the diaspora. Geeta ji sitting at the front, she's one of the diaspora. Are we any different to you? No. We've sat in the very chairs where you are sitting today. All right? And all of you have dreams. All of you have ambitions. And my first advice to all of you is keep that fire. Manifest that fire, keep it, unleash it. First advice. Now, I thought many of you know me as a gastroenterologist. Well, you don't know me, but I am known as a gastroenterologist, a liver specialist. But I want to give you a story. See, we all know about the India story, the evolving India growth story. But very few of us know about the NRI story. There's a story about NRIs. When we think of NRIs, we think of Indians who live overseas, the US, the UK. I was born and raised in the UK. My Dadaji left India in 1927 and he moved to Africa, East Africa. So a lot of us Indians, they moved to Africa. He was there from 1927 to the 1960s. My father was born there. So he's never lived in Bharat. And then my father migrated to the UK in 1957. So he was there for over 50 years, a long time. There were no Indians then. Koi Hindi nahi bolta tha, apna khana nahi milta tha, nothing of the sort. So I was born there, raised in the 1980s, and England was a very different place to today for Indians. I'm giving you a bit of a story here. My mother, Bareilly ki hai, UP, short, dhoti pehndi hai, choti, bindi, as you'd expect, typical lady from UP. But when we used to go to school, there'd be sometimes kids throwing stones at her because she looked different. Right? I was only 5 years old. What could I do? Nothing. But this was part of the world that NRIs lived in. Now, India or Bharat at the time had a certain perception. Backwards, poor. It's nothing much. Why would anyone want to go to Bharat? No one called it Bharat back then either. It was a waste of time. My household was very different. We had pretty stringent Hindu values, and I'm very grateful because as a result, I'm Western minded, yet I've got Hindu and Bharatiya values. Now, when you think of NRIs, who saw Modi ji's visit to Australia? Hands up. The stadium. There was a stadium, he's like a rock concert. Anthony Albanese mentioned, I've never been to such a stadium before.
You would remember Vijay Chathaiwalaji when he came, he showed that video.
Oh, so you've met Vijayji, fine. So we had arranged Modi Airways at the time, which was an airline, a plane going from Melbourne to Sydney. Now have you thought, why on earth would so many Indians overseas come to meet Modi ji? Why? Is it just because of the economic opportunities? What you need to realize, and I'm going to touch upon this, there's a social psychological aspect here. The cultural connect, the identity connect. See, in the 80s and 90s, people were not ashamed, but they weren't so proud to be associated with India. I'll be completely honest with you. Ghar mein Hindi bolte the, they would say, you're backward. Sari pehnte the, you're backward. When you spoke to the French, they would speak French. You go to Germany, they'd speak German. and they'd be very proud of their heritage. But when it came to Bharatiya values, they'd be very shy and ashamed almost. So, what I need all of you to understand, NRIs are a very passionate group of people. They want to connect with you. All of you. All right? All of you. And there's a statistic from 2020 that 3.4% of Bharat's GDP was contributed by NRIs. But what is the fascinating fact is that 3.4% was only contributed by 1% of the NRI population. So what if we can tap into that NRI group from 1% to 10%? How much capital would you get if you want to start your startup? How much capital would you get if you want to invest it? That's just the economic side. Let's talk at Rishihood University. Why was I so passionate about this place and about all of you coming here? Is because you are going to be the leaders. You're not just doing any old degree here. You can go to any other university. The whole point of coming to this institution is that you are the leader in your field, be it computer technology, with AI coming up now. How many of you use AI? Hands up. Yeah, I'm sure one of you is going to create the next version of ChatGPT, right? But the use of AI, Indian skill set is so highly regarded overseas now. When you think of technology, you think Bharat. You may not know this, but I'm telling you from living overseas. Overseas, telecommunication is very backwards. It's very backwards. Don't even talk about Australia. I'm from the UK and it hurts going to Australia. It is that slow, it is that backward. But this is where all of you can tap in. So what we're trying to do with experts like Geeta ji and other faculty members is create ecosystems. If any of you have an idea, touch base with us. You know, if there's an idea for entrepreneurship, for starting a company, tap into the NRIs for capital. That's just the capital side. Now comes the mentorship side. We were just talking before coming here. If you've got two candidates who come for a job interview, right? And this is really important, which we are taught in our schools from a very young age. See, when I was in England in school, I was not taught, when I say stand up, you stand up. When I say sit down, you sit down. I was not taught that. I was taught, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? They wanted independent thinking people. They didn't want sheep who just follows the crowd. That's what Rishihood does. That's the whole aim of Rishihood. So for example, you've got two candidates for a job. One of them will have an amazing CV, PhD, masters, publication. You know, they've been on this committee, that committee. And then you've got another candidate, maybe not as apt, maybe not as qualified, but they're in the interview, and the first person, they can barely talk. They're very bright. There's no issue with their intelligence. Absolutely none. The second person is able to communicate more effectively. They're able to disagree. See, disagreeing is very important. The ability to say no is extremely important. Saying yes all the time is not what we want. If there's an idea put out there and you disagree, you should have the courage to say, I disagree because X, Y, Z. See, overseas, that's not seen personally. That's not seen as, oh, he's being rude. I know there are cultural differences, but this institution is not to continue the norm which is out there. It is to be an interrupter. So, rather than, I want you to think of two separate areas in your lives. One is your expertise, be it computer technology, be it economic, be it capital, psychology, it does not matter what it is. Be the best in that, and be the best that you can. But secondly, work on yourself. Work on yourself, your identity, work on your, I'm not going to say confidence because I don't like that word. People always talk about confidence. Confidence is not something you work on. It's something that comes from within when you are in a secure place. It's as simple as that. Work on that second part because then your real talent will come out. You're not going to look at other people, oh, they're doing this, so I should do this. Oh, they told me to do this, so I'm going to do this. No. Do you not all have individual brains? Do you not all have individual opinions? We want all of your individuality coming out, not an agenda set by me or Sahilji and you just following. So coming back to the dream really is that NRIs and Bharat start to merge together. Zerodha CEO, you may have seen this on the news, at the Gujarat Vibrant Summit a few days ago. He was giving a talk. Yeah. Right? Put your hand up. Who saw that speech briefly on the news? Yeah. Kamath, exactly. And he said the NRIs overseas are experiencing something called FOMO. Right? Fear of missing out. Because we are. You speak to anyone overseas, we're thinking, we're working in our karma bhumi, 100%. But at the same time, we're thinking, well, hang on, how can we contribute to Bharat? How can we pump more capital in? How can we contribute from an academic perspective, from a mentorship perspective? So what we will be doing from overseas as Diaspora is trying to create ecosystems where we live, so that if all of you want to reach out, you can do. Be it capital, be it knowledge, mentorship, academics. But like I said, whatever you do, it starts with you. Alright? Your success is not going to be as good as your idea. It's going to be as good as you are as a person. So please, my humble request is work on yourself. Know yourself, connect with yourself, understand your values, and then you'll see the magic. So Sahil ji's question for all of you. I'm speaking in English, लेकिन मुझे हिंदी भी आती है. तो साहिल जी से मैं हिंदी में बात करता हूँ. And it's not easy because, like I said, I'm third generation in Indian outside of Bharat. बहुत मार खाई है. पापा से बहुत मार खाई है. कि घर में सिर्फ हिंदी बोलना था. English नहीं. I wasn't allowed to speak English at home. That's number one. And it's really difficult because my first language is English. मेरा जो पूरा सोच है, it's completely Western. But Papa's theory was this. In fact, this is really interesting. आप देखोगे जो UK के लोग हैं, they're very patriotic, they're very connected compared to the US. US maybe, but UK is far more because the migrants who went to the UK are from African Indian heritage. Whereas those who went to the US are from they're Indian migrants directly from Bharat. I'll tell you a bit of an insight. माँ बरेली की है मेरी, जो पापा है मेरे वो अफ्रीका के. So my African Indians are very assertive. अम्मा बोलती थी धीरे बोलो, बुरा लग जाएगा, ज़्यादा नहीं बोलो. You know all of those. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that. Whereas my father, Papa, he used to say, that's your right. तुम्हारा हक है. Go and get it. Why are you quiet? Speak up. So it was a very interesting household where one was from Africa, one was from India. The Indian one was a little bit more shy, bit dosa, ki bura na lag jaye. But Papa was completely opposite. He's like, it's your right. Speak up. Don't worry about the consequences. And a lot of Bharatiya origin people in the UK are like that. Now, I am not going to generalize to everyone. Certainly not. This is just an anecdote from my household. Lekin generally, jo UK ke hain, they are more assertive. So answering your question, I think all of you will come to this point. You have a lot of outward pressures. You know, you got to speak English, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. When I used to come to India in the 90s and 80s, then I'd speak Hindi. Now people would speak Hindi back to me, but as soon as they found out I'm from the UK, English chalu. Right? And that used to annoy me. It's really annoying me. And then I used to speak in English and they couldn't understand my accent. And I'm like, well, why are you talking then? Right? So it was just that insecurity mindset, unfortunately, that has been in our system here in Bharat, I would say between the 1950s and 2000. These 50 years, the system has been injected with insecurity, low self-esteem about us as an individual, about us as a nation, our itihas, our culture, everything. Everything. Really, we also don't need to go the other end where we go telling people how proud we are and how good we are. No, we don't have to do that. Just be comfortable. Just be yourself. And like I said, I want all of you to be ambassadors so that if you are one day at a World Economic Forum, imagine yourself, all right, presenting in the World Economic Forum, then I'd like you to go up and start your speech with Namaste. As an example. That speaks volumes. You don't have to say anything else. Done deal. So I think the household is really important. I'm digressing here, but I found in Bharat there's very little discussion on family as well. It's all about external. Let's pump this much money, let's do this, let's do that. That's important. But if you don't have a safe and if you don't have a solid family, you're not going to get very far. So I think that whole discussion and conversation on family, I've got 3 boys, by the way. All right? Adarsh, Yuvan and Avinash, 10, 8 and 5. And they asked me a lot of questions. Good fun. But they're also learning that they've got dual identities almost. But it's our responsibility as parents to make sure they know about their Bharatiya side. So I think it's very important. Don't forget that side. Very important question.
Which country in East Africa you family?
So Papa moved to, my Dadaji moved to Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. So Papa was born there, but then he was only 17 when he went to the UK. Mm-hmm.
Does your father go back to Tanzania?
No, he hasn't visited ever since. He's very forward-thinking. He forgets the past. He never looks back at the past. Very pragmatic. Yes?
So India is actually a very large country, right? So I've been thinking about this. In order to achieve the global dream, all of Indians should come together. Like for example, in the previous for our independence movement, everybody came together and finally we were able to achieve it, right? And somehow Gandhi managed it to bring most of the people together and we were able to achieve our independence, right? But if you look at now, achieving the India's global dream from developing nation to a developed nation, let's say what will be your approach to bring whole of India together?
Great question, Murali. Number one, if you look back at, I'll rephrase it. Humans come together for a cause. They will not come together just for a lovely vision. That's not human nature. So, during independence, there was a very strong emotional cause which brought everyone together. The challenge of using Bharat and the idea of developing Bharat as that similar cause to bring everyone together, the challenge is sustaining it. See, in the beginning, it's fantastic. It's a very lovely romanticized thought, which everyone here is working towards. My approach would be actually looking at the person and all Bharatiyas, almost subdividing them in what their area of interest is. So academic or technology, that they're your minor states within the big country. You got Bharat, and then the states would be your area of work. Unite them through work. Not just through discussions. That will just get the juices flowing, but you need that sustainability. And it's very unrealistic for such a large population to remain united due to one thought. It's very difficult. I'm not going to say impossible. But let's just say half of you are computer tech students. Some of you may then decide, all right, for Bharat's development, I want to create the next AI platform. That's your course. But then you've got to go course to course to course, project to project to project. In the process, your role should be atmiyata, which is creating that kind of brotherhood-like feeling between each other, where you're supporting each other, where you're furthering each other. Again, I wanted to say the output is one dimension, but then you've got the intangible dimension of the relationship. Never sacrifice relationship for your own personal gain. I'm not saying you do, but humans tend to do that. So answering your question, I'd say that's how I see that dream coming together. Everyone working in their respective areas, politics, economic, social, for that grander cause. Yes.
My name is Ram. So, as an NRI, so what is your view of coming back to India? So we know why people leave India for various reasons. So now you are saying that NRIs want to contribute to India. They have the fear of missing out and things like that. So why do they want to contribute from there? Why don't they come here?
That's a great question, Ram. So there was an interesting article that more and more NRIs are looking to retire in Bharat. All right? They're looking to retire. They're looking at the old age care sector. I'm coming to your thing about the contribution. When you are living overseas, you've put deep roots wherever you've lived. To uproot oneself to be part of the Bharat story, absolutely possible. Unrealistic. Unrealistic. So what they tend to think, I'm not going to uproot myself because A, they've migrated. That was a huge risk. They started from scratch. And life is very difficult over there. Like, it sounds all glamorous, but it's actually very difficult until you are established. So then economic tends to be the main way. Now, the other form in which they're contributing is cultural, social, and political. So they're coming back here to help at the social level, philanthropy. What I predict in the next generation, and I think, for example, my boys will do this, they may come and set up a company here. I've got friends in Australia of Bharati origin who have companies here. They're still living there, but it's inevitable they will have to come back. If their company's here, they're not going to live there forever. One's got a cybersecurity firm in Delhi. He comes back 4 to 6 times a year. That's not sustainable. So they're going to come back. I think, answering your question, setting up work here is going to be that catalyst for NRIs to come back. Until that happens, it's going to be remote online contribution.
I'll add, it's a very good question. We have examples of Sanjeev ji and Anil ji, in our own, your teachers are there who physically also moved back and they're contributing whatever they can. And one thing we should learn is from the Chinese example of how they brought in experts, Chinese experts who globally back to China, and currently Chinese R&D is based on the bedrock of that talent which moved back from other countries to China.
And I would like to add, see, right now there's a divide. There's those who live in Bharat and there's Bharatiyas who live outside. The whole aim is for that to become one, not geographically. Connecting, relationship-wise as one. Then it doesn't matter. Like, for example, the Jews, whether they live in Israel or they live in the US, they are acting as one. That's the dream. Not for everyone to physically come back. But the brain drain is slowing down. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The opportunities will be here. It's about to take off. I'm not going to say it's quite taken off yet.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So that was what I meant.
Yeah.
So you said that earlier people were shy to express their identity and things like that. So we could see that they don't find any opportunity here to stay here or come back, something like that. So they are looking for opportunities and they're going there. So are we going to be bigger than other nations and are going to attract talent like how you did?
The very demographic strength that we have of the youth is going to really rocket us, all of you. the youth demographic population here, getting tapped into that is our secret for success. I think absolutely we're going to rocket forward, but it won't be in the next 5 years. In terms of when you look at the US and other such countries, it's going to take longer than that. Now, for all of you, where I think you've got the opportunity, see, in business or in any field for that matter, timing is key. We've got the vision, we've got the dream, but the ground reality ecosystems are not quite there yet. We all want to contribute. But when we do, comparing to overseas, you go overseas, there are ready-made ecosystems. Academia, capital, investment, you name it. Israel, US, Singapore, Australia. That is not yet here into that maturity level. But where you can all tap into, which I think is really a huge opportunity, is creating those ecosystems. Be platform creators. Be ecosystem creators. Don't be an app creator. I'm just using that as an analogy. Because that is far bigger. Then you'll see the NRIs and overseas coming back to you. It's going to happen in stages. Stage 1 will be more collaboration. Stage 2 will be more closer IP sharing, technology sharing. So if you look at where we can work together, there's knowledge, there's new products or services, there's investment, there's technology, those 4. If you can think of it in those 4 areas, coming physically back, that will be the final stage.
So we have to increase their FOMO.
Sorry?
We have to increase their FOMO.
Correct. And do it hard. Absolutely.
So one operational step is like in India allowing dual citizenship. All major economies they allow dual citizenship, except India.
Yeah. OCI, they've tried to do with the OCI. It's not the same.
It's not.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
I have one question.
Yes.
How are Indian values translate to successful professionals? Because many times we think that our values are barrier towards being successful.
Wow. Thank you. What a great question. So, for those who didn't hear, how do our sanskars, values, contribute to our success? Is that correct? In the professional world and where we live. See, I'm actually very grateful for that question and at the same time surprised to hear that there are a significant proportion of people in this country who think like that. Overseas, complete opposite. Complete opposite. Now, I'm not saying that you meet any NRI, they're going to be highly attached to their culture or highly, patriotic. That's not what I'm saying. But the biggest values and sanskars that Bharat has given to humanity, I'm not going to say to the country, to humanity, we all know Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That has really rocketed our skill set of relationship building and creating alliances and ecosystems again for success, number 1. Number 2, humility. Humility. See, when you speak to certain other nationalities, I'm not going to mention names, there are some which are quite renowned for being difficult to work with. People from Bharat, they're not difficult to work with. So that is a huge attractive feature. Why is it that a lot of the American large fortune companies have our origin CEOs? Because you've got to navigate your way through the corporate ladder. It's not just about output, it's about you as a person. Hence back to the biggest contribution of our values is to you as a person. If you can have a solid character, which our values contribute to, that's going to ensure your success. The traditional values. The other one I will say, which is really important, those who are really connected, is working with detachment. Working with detachment. So we all define success by what we achieve with the results. But if you look at our scriptures, they define success by your effort. They define success by what you do, the process, not by what you achieve. You having a massive ambition and trying to work towards it, that is your success. Now, whether you achieve it or not is completely immaterial. That's not up to you. That's not in your hands. We take too much credit for having control. We don't have control. So have large goals, have large ambitions, have a purposeful goal towards the nation, towards humanity, Samaj, and just work on it. Chisel away. So I think that's a very big value that contributes to our success. Yes.
So, myself, Ritika. So, as we're talking about NRIs, we Indians go to foreign countries for further studies and for further development. But it's the irony is that people from other countries come to India for the better studies, because like their mindset, I think, revolves around that India is a large economy. It recently became the largest economy in the world. So even before that, people from other countries really had that mindset that Indians are different. I personally think that they have a different mindset for Indians, and I think that is one positive point that like from independence to now. Even before that, we were thought as like we were not really taken seriously, but now in this large world, we are taken seriously, and the people do come to India for further studies because they think that it's really, I think it's a really step ahead for them, and that Indians really have made a long way from where they were to now. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. Few thoughts. Number one, I think we're just scratching the surface when you refer to NRIs coming to Bharat for further studies. I really think that hasn't taken off. I think the numbers are so small, it's not there yet. Being completely practical, Deakin University opened a campus last week here in Bharat. That's one of the first, it is the first Australian mainstream university campus to open here.
It's actually globally the first.
Is it globally? Okay, so I wasn't sure about that. So globally the first. That's a huge step. That's a huge step. I completely agree with your statement that people take, the world takes, Bharat more seriously, 100%, last 10 years. But that has actually only come up in the last 4 to 5 years. The first 5 years, it wasn't there. Everyone was watching what's going to happen. Big dreams, big statements. Now that it's coming into effect, the trust factor's there, number one. Number two, if you cut to the core reason of why NRIs moved out, it was pure economic and future security. Simple. You can put it down to those two things. They'll have better economic prosperity, career will lead to that, and for their children, it's a better future. Right? Coming back here, again, for NRIs, I'm saying, only for NRIs, that incentive, not quite there yet. But where the incentive is for setting up work here, that is the first step. Once your work is set here, then the rest will follow. So I think if this current trajectory continues, the next 10 years you will see a lot of NRIs settling here. Now it's transit. They come, they go back, they come, they go back, except for obviously a select few. But I think give it another 10 years of what we've been through, then we'll see what you are saying, where people will come. See, again, with higher studies, we were talking, it's a lot. It's not just about doing degrees. It's about the academic output. The articles you publish, in which journal you publish, which has an impact factor, all of you know that. That also determines the credibility level of your research. That high level of research then attracts funding. It's that ecosystem. If you go to Australia, if you go to UK and US, that ecosystem is very advanced. They've perfected that game. It's all a game. You just need to know the rules. But what we are trying to do here is play that game in a very meaningful way towards Samaj and the nation. Not just for the institution. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I want all of you leaving today not thinking you're just a student, and take away that word just. I want you to think, what's your role going to be? And don't share it with anyone. Don't share it with anyone. Keep it to yourself. That's more powerful.
I said, yeah, I know I did a little. So that was the picture of Indian students going in overseas. good in IT, good in mathematics, and so on. So picture is changing slowly. They really appreciated us. They looked at us. Oh yeah, no, they are good students coming in. So no snake charmers anymore.
None. What I will say is, in light of all the good things that have been said, the challenges are as follows from just a personal experience. When I speak to people about, they'll say great opportunities, in India, blah, 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 which we've all just discussed, but they're still reserved of committing. They're still reserved to commit capital very often. They're still reserved in the optimism of the picture that's being painted. Very often. Not all, very often. And I'm talking about not all NRIs, but a significant proportion of NRIs, but even locals like Australians and so forth. You speak to Australians, they're not going to think of India or Bharat as a possible destination to invest in. They'll be thinking US, they'll be thinking other countries, they're not going to think here. So I think it's also important for you to all understand, in the global picture, we've got a lot of work to do. We are nowhere, we're not there, in line with the US. We're not there in line with the Singaporeans and so forth, the Israelis. We're not there yet. But I think another 5 to 10 years of continued trajectory at this rate, no problem. So have that in your mind, because a lot of you will be thinking, well, hang on, if the picture is so great, why are we not seeing more people come here? Why are we not seeing more investments coming? This is the reason. People like us, we visit Bharat often, so we don't have apprehensions. Majority of people don't. I have friends and colleagues in the UK who've come to Bharat once in their life. Very patriotic. But they've only come once. So you will have a lot of different generation NRIs. And another group of people that we forget are those of Indian origin. And the reason I say that, when we say the word Indian, Fijians won't say they're Indian. Those from Trinidad, Tobago, Suriname, those who went in the 1800s, they're very connected to their culture. Very connected. They'll still speak Hindi or Bhojpuri, amongst themselves. But when it comes to platforms, when you say Indian, they'll have a bit of apprehension. Well, I'm Fiji. They're 5 generations. They're 6 generations. Hard to think. I'm only 3rd generation. They're 5, 6. So also bear in mind of Indian origin, because then you will include more NRIs to speak.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, in my analysis of things, I feel that one of the biggest stumbling block in India's growth story is health of India or Indians. So, what is your take, or given that you are coming from the health sector, what is your take on why we are not able to address some what you call wicked problems in the health sector?
Yeah. Thank you. And that's very close to my heart for obvious reasons. So the question was, the health of people here in Bharat is a problem, and solving that big problem. I think it's a very loaded question, but in my opinion, it comes to 2 factors. One is the individual, and one is the system. Let's talk about the individual. I always believe, and this is something I have seen growing up in the UK and living in Australia, each individual of the society takes quite a lot of responsibility for their health. And that comes down to discipline. So for example, if someone's diabetic, and I've come across this quite often with my relatives, they'll be diabetic, but they'll say, "Ek gulab jamun kha leta hu." Kya jata hai? That one little example, in my opinion, contributes tremendously to the whole well-being of the population. Because in Australia, for example, not everyone, but they are pretty health conscious. You will not see people smoking on the streets. You will not see people consuming bottles of soft drink. As a specialist myself, a lot of my patients will say, I don't want drugs. Tell me what food to eat. Tell me natural therapies. Tell me exercises, I'll do it. They're very fit. Sports is inculcated at a very young age over there. My son, Avinash, he's only 5 years old. But since the age of 3, he has been receiving cricket and soccer training. That's not special. He's not special. But that infrastructure for sports is there from a young age. So that inculcates the culture for physical activity. I played soccer and I still play soccer now. Why? Because since a young boy, that's all I did. I played soccer. So I think one aspect is the sports infrastructure at a very grassroots level. Another huge opportunity if someone wants to go into that and set things up. 1. 2, back to the individual, the self-discipline and having clarity of what is important to us as an individual. If a person does not feel health is important, because externally it's all economic and political results. That's what's important. And academic, the 3. So I think that's number 2. Number 3, in Bharat, you've got three almost parallel health systems. You've got the mainstream medicine, then you've got Ayurveda and traditional, you've got homeopathy. You've got so many parallel, which I think is actually a blessing, because you cannot physically design a healthcare system which will accommodate every individual of 1.4 billion people. You have to design a health system, a preventative health system, probably in parallel. See, the whole Western notion of health is just symptom control. You're not addressing the problem early enough. So starting sports at a young age, having a bit more awareness about food and what to eat, what not to eat, having a formalized scaffold for the preventative health of our traditional systems. They're all there. We don't need to prove it with science again. It's all there. But really, it all starts with the individual. Because if that individual's like, kya fayda? ठीक है, मामा जी देते रहते मुझे मैं ले लूँगा. Right? That's what happens. कोई homeopathy की दवा दे देगा, कोई Ayurveda के दे देगा. It doesn't matter. But I think that discipline, I would say one word, discipline of the individual. We see a lot more of that in Australia. I hope that answers your question. No more? Sab so gaye?
No, sir.
Yes.
Sir, the last question.
Namaste and good morning. My name is Manu. My question is, how do you define Indian global dream, and what are the main challenges and opportunities for achieving it?
2 दिन का समय है. Namaste, Manu. So, how do I define it? I think the way I see that dream is having excellence and outcomes in this modern contemporary world, coupled with a strong cultural identity. If I can put it very simply, right? Think about that. So you're going to build highways, and which is happening now. High rail roads and academic institutions. All of that. That's contemporary world. We need to have excellence in that. But exactly what Rishi Hood is doing, tying it up with the cultural and intrinsic nature and knowledge systems of this land. That's our value-adding factor, which the world desperately needs. See, Americans, they're cowboys. You can judge a country by their history. Remember that. Know the history of a country. The British history, the American history. A lot of their characteristics today will be reflected by what they were in history. It doesn't change that much. The challenges, I think, are getting proof where the pudding is, meaning We've got all these dreams, we've got all these plans, now deliver it. Just deliver it. Right? And for all of you, I think the biggest other challenge is generally in this country, I find, there's not enough independent thinkers. There's not enough. You'll have a group of 10 people, due to social conditioning and the systems locally, they will be too shy. They'll be too scared. They're not assertive enough. Assertive does not, and I want to be very clear here, assertive does not mean being aggressive. Assertive does not mean shouting. Assertive simply means you are comfortable in who you are and you're able to communicate your own thoughts. That's it. So I think if all of you can work on that, that's the biggest challenge. Because then you're unleashing the Yuva of this country. Yuvas for Seva. Everyone must have heard of that. So many Yuvas from the UK have come here on the ground and contributed. So there are not a lack of NRIs who want to come on the ground. Quite the opposite. People overseas are prepared to take 6 months off. I'm talking Yuvas here. It's just, there's two aspects. Create the environment and an easy platform for them to connect with and to get your message out. That's your secret. Because then word of mouth will spread like fire. You need to do the work here. Setting things up so that people can come from overseas, but then get them part of your team, advisory team or whatever you're doing. Then you'll find all the other components will also follow, be it economic, be it goodwill. See, really you're building relationships, goodwill. The rest will come. So I would say, create something, get your message out. They're ready. Trust me, they're always looking, what shall I do? See, overseas it's very common to have a gap year. So you finish year 12, you do nothing for a year. You're not meant to do nothing. And then you go to university. But in that 1 year, if something is set up and they know about it, they'll come.